post-traumatic stress. And I don't put the D on the end of it because that is sort of a stigma too. Post-traumatic stress is something probably a lifelong coping. Also, traumatic brain injury. For the women groups we take out, many have experienced sexual trauma. Many have experienced rape from often unit members that they served with. So there are levels and degrees of trauma that veterans are coping with, and we we don't pry into those. If they come up in conversation, that's the choice of the participant. Often those thoughts, those traumas come up during the casual part of the program when we're not discussing a reading in a formal seminar setting. So that takes place around a campfire, on the trail, slicing vegetables in our kitchen. Um, but the understanding of veterans' traumas is very complex and very difficult. And I don't pretend to be an expert on it at all. All I can do and all we do is offer a non judgmental approach to welcome them into our midst. And that's about the best we can do and coupled with a nature experience and a philosophical inquiry into life. Uh, anyway, I'm getting in the weeds here, but we try to be an understanding, non-judgmental, unconditional love experience here.
Sure. And I mean, you're talking about welcoming them into your midst. What does a typical weekend look like for a vet that signs up for your program?
They arrive on a Thursday afternoon. So our programs are long weekends. They're short. I mean, a lot of veterans can't get away for a full week. So we keep it as small as we can, but with enough time to make a difference. So arrival Thursday afternoon. If they fly in, we pick them up at the airport and take them immediately up to our base camp. Our base camp is on a beautiful piece of undeveloped land overlooking a vast range of mountain peaks on the Elk Range. We have three big teepees that we house our veterans in. We have a little chuck wagon trailer that we have at the site that we make gourmet meals on. And when I say gourmet, it's organic, locally grown food that my hut masters, one of whom is my son Tate, the other is Jake Saxon. They create these wonderful organic, mostly vegetarian meals and serve a wonderful dinner. My board comes up for the introductory session, and they introduce themselves and describe their own challenges in homecoming. That opens the channels for our participants then to describe their experiences with homecoming, and we get to know them immediately, and they're very honest and open about this. And a lot of them describe really difficult experiences. So we know then in advance, before we even hit the trail, who's in our group and what kind of experience we have. We also, on every trip, we have a psychologist or some therapy individual who knows how to work with veterans. That's not because we're a therapy program, and we're not per se. We offer therapeutic experiences, but we're not programming anybody. It's all very casual and easy, but we have a psychologist on board to answer any questions or to intervene if that's necessary. We've never had to have that, but the psychologist is there as a sounding board. So we have this opening dinner, we have this opening introductory session, and then the next morning we're up early, we pack lunches, and we take day packs to the trailhead, and we walk, depending on which hut we use, either about 7 miles or 10 miles. And we hike up to uh, the highest hut we use is at 11,300 feet. It's a 10-mile hike. It's not an easy day. So we pace ourselves. We are in a wilderness area where we see no one else because this trail is not used. And that bonds our groups immediately because we're the only ones there. I mean, we may see an elk or a deer or a bear, but we're not seeing other people. So we are isolated in our little confinement there. We get up to the mountain hut. There's no road that we see, but we can drive a truck right to the hut. So it's this wonderful mix of a supported trip in the mountains with just day hike weight on our backs. And we get to the hut and we spend 3 days there. We have our meals there. We have campfires, and on our layover day, we hike up to the top of a peak called Mount Yekel. And we have a session up there. We do solos for an hour on this ridge overlooking an expansive mountain peaks. It's spectacular. It's beautiful. And then we come back and uh, we have we have regular discussions throughout. So there is a curriculum and there's a syllabus. There's a notebook of readings that goes to every participant in advance. And those discussions I moderate through the Socratic technique of inquiry. They're not lectures, they're discussions about philosophy that plumb the deeper depths of what it means to be a human being.
You also split these trips up into men's and women's trips, right?
Yes,
And you just had a women's trip. Can you kind of talk about the differences between the two and why you make them different?
we make them different because we think that with separate gender programs, the level of disclosure is deeper. Um, I know for a fact that men will talk a lot more openly and express vulnerabilities much more openly with a group of men than they will with women in the room. Um, the women also need to be able to talk their talk, and what goes on in the conversations is amazing. Um, Zach, the very first trip that we ran in 2013, I didn't know if it was going to be a success. It was an experiment. It's still an experiment, but that first night at the hut, when I heard laughter coming out of that hut, and I stood outside just to take a break. But when I heard them laughing, I knew that something positive was happening, that there was a connection. And laughter, I think, is the first step in loosening yourself and feeling a sense of joy, which many veterans have not felt for a long time. And they feel it with their brothers and they feel it with their sisters. So we just took a women's group out. We had 8 uh, veteran women from different branches: Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps. And these women come together and they are immediately sisters. Uh, to hear just the vernacular of their speech, it's like one of our women veterans. She said, "These are my people. These are my people." And she lives in a place where there are no veterans. And she said, to be with my sisters in action, this is what I can relate to, and this is what I've needed to relate to. So um, they first of all bond almost immediately, and then through the discussions, they learn more about each other and about themselves. And that's the ultimate takeaway of this program: is to learn that they're not alone in what they experienced in the military. That when a story is told at the table or on a trailhead or around a campfire, a hand goes up. Me too. That happened to me too. And that sharing of mutuality is so comforting to know that we are not alone. And so they get to know each other, but they also get to know themselves through that experience, and self knowledge through that way of reflection of self is another real important part. And the solos is what really drives that home: is to be by yourself in a Shinrin Yoku experience, to just be and let your mind just freewheel and see what comes up and deal with it. And sometimes it's tough to deal with that stuff. But that's why we have a psychologist. That's why we debrief the solos afterwards, so that they can share their experiences and know that they're not alone in what their thoughts are.
And so at the end of a trip, obviously everybody's feeling really good. Do you follow up with some of these vets and see how they're doing later? How do you judge the success of what you do?
Yeah, we definitely follow up. We have a Facebook page, we have a website, we have a blog on our website that veterans contribute writing to, photographs, poetry. Our Facebook, we post regularly on that, so we try to keep that current and we post a lot of photos of natural settings. One of our board members, Dan Glidden, he's a Vietnam vet. He served in what he calls the Brown Water Navy. He was on riverboats in Vietnam, and he is a photographer and photographs up and down our valleys, and he's become quite adept at photographing wildlife. So we post pictures that are beautiful, and our veterans can visit those pages and see images, and then we bring uh, certain veterans back. We invite veterans to come back and be peer mentors on trips. So they come back to refresh themselves on the values that we promote, and they then help the newcomers to adjust to the experience by just giving them confidence in what the experience is. Um, some of our veteran alumni have become co-moderators, so we run training trips as well, and those are co-ed, and that becomes very interesting when we mix the genders on training trips, because what I ask is for each veteran who comes to bring a reading that they want to moderate. So they then take over the discussion, they lead the discussion, and they get to know what it's like to moderate a conversation about something that's important and pertinent to them. So we try to engage them as much as possible, and to keep it going that way.
And for normal people, normal civilians like me, what are ways that we can help not just Huts for Vets, but veterans in general? What can we do?
Another offshoot of this program that I created about 5 years ago is called War Stories. Um, I bring together veterans who live in our community, mostly my board members, and civilians in the community for discussions on the literature of war and on the experiences of war. So our regional library, the Salt Regional Library, gives us a room for free, and we convene in that room with a discussion notebook that we've all read. And again, these are moderated discussions, but what takes place in that room is bridging the gap between civilians and veterans, which is a huge gap in this country. And by having open discussion on experiences of war, or the most recent one we discussed was moral injury. And that's another huge aspect of the veteran experience is this suffering moral injury from having done things and seen things that violate one's deepest moral precepts. And when you communicate those thoughts between veterans and civilians, you realize that there's a unity there. And so we try to bridge that gap. And the best thing I think civilians can do is to, when they meet a veteran, go beyond the thank you for your service mantra. Go beyond a sort of a passing greeting, and actually ask that person how they feel. Where did you serve? What was your experience like? Are you comfortable talking about it? And offer them a listening. Offer them the ability to speak, because listening is the where is really where the first exchange begins. So um, we encourage civilians not to be frightened of veterans, which they often are. They don't know how to approach a veteran, and veterans to give a little to the civilians who they may not respect all that much, but need to be part of their lives. So anyway, bridging that gap, and with with a with a sense of harmony.
And what's the future hold for Huts for Vets? I mean, you've obviously started the War Stories part of the organization. Are there any other plans to branch out or get even larger than you are now?
We would like to, but gradually, slowly, we want to make sure our programs maintain a very high quality. And a lot of that is determined by the personalities of the people on the program. Our team is like a family. We are great friends. We love one another, and and we have fun with one another too. We're very comfortable, and so there's a level of humor and lightness, and there's um, there's also a commitment to each individual veteran we serve. It's not just like, oh, here's another group, let's get them through. We want to engage meaningfully with every veteran we have. So